event. We're gonna get started shortly, so just please sit tight and we get started. I'm just gonna set up the Facebook Live and we get started in just a couple minutes. Thank you. All right. Just want to welcome those who just joined us. Thanks so much. Just give us one more minute here and we'll get started. In the meantime, if you just feel free to join us on the chat and just just say hi and where you're joining us from, that'd be awesome. Thank you. Okay, so we see some Toronto folks who are joining us. Thanks so much for taking time out of your Sunday. Just a couple of seconds here. All right. Okay, so Mike and Rene, are you ready to get started here?
We're ready, yeah.
Okay. All right. So again, just want to thank everyone for joining us today for another Love is Medicine event. Just before we get started, I want to go through our usual housekeeping. Please note that this session is being recorded. We're also live on Facebook. So please just take note of that in terms of your audio, your video. Also, we are going to have a presentation, but following that, we're going to have some questions. It's one of the probably the most fun part of our sessions. So if you have questions as the presentation goes along, please do enter them into the chat box and we try to get to as many as possible. And also do note that this is for educational purposes only. So we obviously this is not exactly a health related topic or directly a health topic, but please do speak to a professional before applying any of this information. I want to recognize our partners for this event. So my name is Daniel from Lifestyles Medicine. It's a not-for-profit based in Toronto, and we put on community-based lifestyle medicine programs to help people prevent and reverse chronic diseases. Why we put this event on is because we know that in lifestyle medicine, our social relationships, our marriages, our friendships are so important for our well-being. And I think our presenters are going to be touching upon that today. So as an effort to try to promote that aspect of health, we put on these events, Love is Medicine, to just talk about topics that will help people hopefully strengthen their marriages, their families, their friendships, etc. So we hope that that's your experience today. We also host these events in partnership with the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We want to thank the West Toronto Korean Seventh-day Adventist Church for partnering with us on this one in particular. Seventh-day Adventists are a Christian denomination that promotes strong families, and also health is a very strong emphasis of their faith practice. So we're really happy about that. Also, Pathways Lifestyle Medicine Clinics in Toronto is also our clinical partner as well. Again, in the clinic setting, oftentimes many people come because of health issues related to family, divorces, or marital stress. So we partner with Pathways to really help foster stronger marriages, and hopefully that will lead to better physical health. All right, before we get going, I just want to also invite you to our next online event. It's called Using Food as Medicine. You're going to hear some powerful stories of how people have reversed chronic diseases like diabetes, heart disease, and get off meds through plant-based diets. So we're going to hear really inspiring stories. So we hope you can join us. That's August 6th, Thursday at 6 p.m. And if you want to sign up, just go to lifestylemed.org/online. So I hope you can join us for that. All right, so today's topic is all you need is love. We're going to be talking about love. What is love? How is it important for our well-being? Where can we find it? And how love is actually a choice, perhaps a new concept for some of us. So really important topics. And again, we want to go to your questions as well after that, after the presentation. Our speakers today are Mike and Rene Lemon, and this is a fun little bio here, but basically they're co-hosts of a nationwide program called It Is Written Canada. It's a faith-based program, and they talk widely about topics related to happiness, mental health, marriages, and relationships. So Mike and Rene, we really want to thank you for joining us today. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Feel free to share more about yourselves. And again, after the presentation by Mike and Rene, we want to get to your questions. So please enter your questions into the chat box as we go along, and we'll get to as many as possible following the presentation. So Mike and Rene, thank you so much, and I'll turn it over to you. All right.
Thanks so much, Daniel.
Mm-hmm.
Very kind
Thank
of
you so much for having us. We feel honored to be here today.
So we want you to imagine a time of great excitement before the creation of the internet, before cell phones, before the time of personal computers. And it took 10 months to bring this event and everything about this event together.
And this event took place on the 25th of June in 1967. And it was the first live satellite television production that was transmitted worldwide, and it was called Our World.
So this was the very first live worldwide satellite transmission. So think about that, how much smaller the world became after that event. Many creative artists from all around the world were invited to perform or to appear in separate segments featuring their countries.
The 2.5-hour event had the largest television audience ever up to that date. At least 400 million people around the globe watched the broadcast live.
And some of the estimates were up to 700 million people watching live at that time. So everything had to be live. 10,000 technicians and producers and interpreters, they took part in this broadcast, and each country had its own announcers with hundreds of millions of people watching at the same time.
Mm-hmm. The transmission started with the Vienna Boys Choir singing in Austria the Our World theme song in 22 different languages. And then Canada was the first country to appear, featuring live segments from around our country: Toronto, Ontario, Ghost Lake, Alberta, Kitsilano Beach in Vancouver, before switching over the transmission to Tokyo, Japan.
And today, that production is most famous for one performance. It was the segment from the United Kingdom starring, now picture it in your mind, the Beatles. They performed the song All You Need Is Love for the first time.
Why was that song the hit of such a major production? What was it about that song, All You Need Is Love, that made it the highlight of the first ever worldwide live satellite transmission? There were many other songs and artists featured on that broadcast. So why was that song the one that received the most attention and topped the event?
In 1967, it was a time of war. And this debut performance of All You Need Is Love was broadcast at the height of the Vietnam War. And the song had this positive message suggesting that to solve the conflicts in the world, all you need is love.
Mm-hmm. And actually, the summer of 1967 was later called the Summer of Love.
So there were some critics of the Beatles, and they criticized the lyrics of the song as being naive or simplistic and even unimaginative. Come on, all you need is love. Can you really say that? Is love truly all you need to experience life?
Well, no, we do need other needs, and we have other needs.
Absolutely.
We need air and food and water and sunlight and sleep and shelter. So the critics are right. You have other needs besides love.
That's true. We do have other needs. Excuse me, my voice. We do have other needs besides love. But there was an extraordinary experiment that was ordered in the 13th century by a German king that revealed that we can't live without love.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he discovered that we cannot experience love without love.
Mm-hmm.
But that was not his aim. His aim was to discover what language infants would speak if they were not spoken to. So in the 13th century, King Frederick II conducted a diabolical experiment.
He believed that babies, if they were left alone and no one spoke to them, they would automatically speak the language of, he thought, Adam and Eve, which he believed would be Hebrew or Greek or Latin or Arabic, and he wasn't sure. He was hoping that it was German because he was a German king.
So the caregivers of these orphan babies were instructed not to speak to the babies and not even to touch them or interact socially with them.
They were supposed to simply meet all of the baby's physical needs for food and for water and shelter, and of course for the changing of their diapers.
The caregivers of the orphan babies were instructed not to speak to, like I mentioned, not to have physical contact or to show any signs of love towards these orphaned infants.
So what do you think happened? The result was that tragically, all the infants died before they could speak. So the findings were that the babies literally died from lack of love.
Modern medicine calls this failure to thrive.
So we flourish under the influence of love, and that's why I like the fact that Daniel invited us to this Love is Medicine, because this is what it's really all about. So they flourished under the influence of love, and we gradually perish without it. So love is like nutritious food for our bodies as well as for our spirit. In this ancient book called the Bible, there is a chapter that's called the love chapter, and it's 1 Corinthians chapter 13.
One of the messages of that chapter is that even if I could speak all the languages of the world, which would be very impressive.
Very impressive, hundreds of languages.
If I could speak hundreds of languages, but if I could in fact speak all the languages of the world, but I do not have love, then I am nothing.
That's what the Bible says. So the Bible says that without love, I am nothing. So perhaps we could reword the lyrics of the Beatles song, All You Need Is Love, if you want to thrive and be somebody. But I don't think that sounds like a good title for a hit song.
So, the need for food, water, sleep, sunshine, and air are great needs we all have. But if you don't have love, then it's hard to really breathe freely. And food doesn't taste very tasty.
It's true. Without love, people lose their appetite and sleep is not so sweet, and it's hard to experience the joy of blue skies and radiant sunshine.
So, without love, we are just like robotic machines moving. Breathe in, breathe out. Chew, chew, swallow. Now close your eyes because it's time to go to sleep. Without love, we are not truly alive, and we simply have our basic needs met, just like those little orphaned infants.
Dr. Dean Ornish, the pioneer of lifestyle medicine, recently wrote a book entitled Undo It: How Simple Lifestyle Changes Can Reverse Most Chronic Diseases. And in the fourth section of that book, Dr. Ornish demonstrates that love is a chief influence for mental, emotional, and even physical health.
Dr. Ornish speaks on the healing power of love and intimacy, and he notes that people who are lonely and isolated, listen to this, are 3 to 10 times more likely to get sick and die prematurely from all causes compared to people who have a sense of love and connection and community. There is nothing else in medicine that has such a powerful impact on our health.
So when it comes to scientific proof, also the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation in 2009, they reported that the Grant study proves that the Beatles were right. All you need is love. So let's take a minute to look at the Grant study, which, according to the CBC, proved that all you need is love.
So the $20 million Grant study was a scientific study that began in 1938. And this study looked at the lives of 268 men who were sophomore students at the time at Harvard University. And the study followed them throughout their lives.
The Grant study is now the longest longitudinal study of biosocial human development ever undertaken. And it's still going on. The purpose of the study was to discover what makes a life a good life. So what do happy people look like? And is there a formula for how to get the most out of life? And how can you experience life to the full? So here's what one of their initial hypotheses was that this is all about men. So men who are more masculine, they said, are going to be happier, which they interpreted was they have to have a narrow waist and broad shoulders. And their findings showed that that had absolutely nothing to do with happiness.
They gave these 268 Harvard men personal questionnaires. They interviewed them in their living rooms, studied their medical records, drew their blood, scanned their brains, talked to their children, videotaped them talking to their wives about their deepest concerns, and even interviewed their wives separately.
So you might think that, of course, all of these men lived happily ever after. They lived successful lives. After all, they were Harvard graduates. But you would be wrong. That was definitely not the case. Even though they all attended one of the most prestigious schools in the world, not all were happy and successful. Not all lived the good life. Some suffered from depression, alcoholism, killed them, or had suicide tendencies as well as committed suicide, and had a hard time keeping a steady job. So what did they learn from this study? And what came from the tens of thousands of pages of information generated on these Harvard men's lives over more than 80 years.
80 years.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, listen to this. The study's chief investigators have come up with one conclusion. Here it is. Happiness is love. Full stop.
So the critics challenged them.
Mm.
Well, that is an outrageous generalization, they said. Aren't you just being sentimental? How can you say 3 words, happiness is love, after this over $20 million research over a period of 80 years, and you come up with one sentence like that? Just, that's too much of a generalization.
Mm-hmm. So the researchers went back to review the data again and again. And the clearest message they got from this over 80-year study is this: good relationships keep us happier and healthier, period. When it comes to how to live the good life, intelligence, social class, genetics, fame, and fortune predict nothing. The short answer is LOVE.
That's just one word.
One word. The person who spent his life thinking of other people more than himself is always living the good life, which is the happiest and most successful life in the long term.
So this unique quality that's called love in this ancient book called the Bible, in 1 Corinthians 13, says that in verse 5, it is not self-seeking. So this is odd because we usually like to connect with people who can do something for us.
Mm-hmm. We always want to know what's in it for me. But when we love unconditionally, we don't ask what's in it for me. You see, we love without expecting anything in return.
Now, I once read this intriguing book, and it's called How Full Is Your Bucket? And so it's about kind of the idea of putting others first is actually good for your health.
So what does the title mean, How Full Is Your Bucket?
It means that each of us or each of you has an invisible bucket. And when your bucket is full, you feel great.
And when it's empty, you feel awful.
So this bucket is constantly being emptied or filled depending on what others say or do to you.
So you want your bucket full because when they are full, then you feel great.
Yeah. According to Tom Rath, who wrote the book, How Full Is Your Bucket? He says, even the briefest interactions affect your relationships, your productivity, your health, and your longevity. So did you get that? Even your briefest interactions will affect how you experience life.
And just like you have an invisible bucket, you also have an invisible dipper that you can either use to fill other people's buckets with positive emotions by saying or doing things that increase their positive emotions, or you can use the invisible dipper to dip from others' buckets by saying or doing things that decrease their positive emotions.
So a full bucket gives you a positive outlook, and an empty bucket poisons your outlook on life.
So here's where your choices come in. You make the choice every moment of every day, whether you fill other people's buckets or whether you dip and take from their buckets.
And these choices, they profoundly affect your relationships, your productivity, your health, and your happiness.
So the obvious question would be, how do I make sure that my bucket is full?
And that sounds like a very self-centered question. But here's what Tom Rath says. He says, the single best thing that you can do to fill your bucket is to do something for another person. So it's like this, the effort that it takes to be kind and thoughtful to others, and really it does take effort. you have to think about it and then do something, go out of your own comfort zone. So the effort that it takes to be kind and thoughtful to others, to do a kind deed, will react in blessings to your own health and your own happiness.
Mhm. So the best way to assure your bucket is full is, in fact, to fill someone else's bucket and to make sure that someone else's bucket is full.
So let's look how that works practically. So say you come into work and someone smiles at you and they introduce themselves and they ask you your name and they're genuinely interested in you. This equals 1 positive.
Mm-hmm. And then you see another person you met about a year ago, and they are visiting from a sister company that is in another town, and you wonder if they will even remember you. And they do. They look you in the eye and smile and greet you by name as though there was no passage of time since the last time you met. So that would equal 1 more positive.
Now you got 2 positives.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the start of the day. But then you look around and you find out you lose your car keys. You've lost them somewhere. You don't know where you lost them. And so you tell your friends, and instead of comforting you and reassuring you, telling you that they're going to help you to look for your keys, they say to you, perhaps you should be more careful and not lose your things all the time. You just always keep losing track of what you have. How come you're always losing things?
Well, what's that?
That's 1 negative.
That's 1 negative.
So you got 2 to 1.
But that's okay, because you have more positives to negatives at this stage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And another friend overhears you and says, don't worry, I'll help you look for your car keys. And they walk with you to retrace your steps, and they find your missing car keys. So now that's
1
more positive.
That was very thoughtful person.
Mm-hmm.
So now you have 3 positives and 1 negatives, and it says not bad, eh? Like, that's okay, 3 to 1. But then you text a friend and you tell them the whole story of losing your car keys and how someone helped you to find them. But instead of rejoicing and saying, oh, that's so good, that's so nice that you found your car keys, they say to you, perhaps you should be more careful. You're always losing your things.
So what's that?
That's 1 more negative. So you got 3 positives, 2 negatives.
Yeah. So marriage expert John Gottman, in his book, Why Marriages Succeed or Fail, wrote about how he studied 700 newlywed couples by recording a 15-minute conversation. And during this 15-minute conversation that he recorded, he was looking for positive versus negative interactions.
And on the basis of these 15-minute conversations with these 700 newlywed couples, he said that if the positives were greater than the negatives by 5 to 1 ratio, then the couples would always continue to enjoy marital intimacy. So 5 positive to 1 negative ratio.
However, if the ratio dipped below 5 to 1, the marriages would cascade towards divorce.
Wow. So they got to keep the positives really high.
Mm-hmm.
So he and his team, on the basis of viewing these 15-minute conversations, they made predictions about whether or not these couples would be either married or divorced in 10 years, just on the basis of 15-minute conversations.
And after 10 years, they found that their predictions had a 94% accuracy.
So this is what happens when 2 people love one another more than they love themselves. If they have a 5 to 1 ratio, then they say nice things to each other, they do kind deeds for one another, and that keeps the marriage solid and together and enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. So let's take a minute and go back to the Grant study.
Okay, so the researchers, they were looking at the entire lives of these 268 Harvard men, and they learned 3 things. They learned, first of all, that social connections are really, really good for us. And loneliness, on the other hand, kills. So those who are more socially connected to family, to friends, to community are happier. And get this, they are physically happier. They have higher incomes measurably, and they live much longer than people who are less well connected.
Mm-hmm. Wow. However, you can also be lonely in a crowd
Mhm.
and in an unhappy marriage. So the second lesson they learned is that it's not just the number of friends you have or whether you are in a committed relationship, but it's the quality of those relationships that matters. High conflict relationships without much love and intimacy turn out to be worse for your health than getting divorced.
So you don't want to be in a high conflict relationship.
Mm-mm.
The third important lesson that they learned was that good relationships do not just protect our bodies, but they also protect our brains.
Mm. So, being in a securely attached relationship to another person in our 80s keeps our memories sharper for longer.
But people in relationships who feel that they can't count on the people closest to them experience early memory decline.
Mhm. They also found that the warmth of these men's childhood relationships with their fathers and mothers correlated with lower rates of adult anxiety, greater enjoyment of vacations, higher income, greater effectiveness at work, and increased life satisfaction.
However, in this entire study, there was one particular man, a Dr. Gottfried Minot Camille, whose nuclear family, that's his parental family,
Mhm.
was described as a total disaster. But, so how bad was it?
Mm.
Well, it was so bad that when he was at Harvard, people avoided him. He was bad with relationships and he was very clingy. He was always looking for attention. And he was always at the doctor's office. And people thought he was a hypochondriac. When he graduated and became a medical doctor, the year that he graduated, he tried to commit suicide.
Mm.
So he was in and out of the hospital repeatedly. What really helped him, this is kind of odd, was that he ended up in the hospital with tuberculosis for over a year. He got lots of love and attention when he was in the hospital. And that really helped him. And it helped him because he all of a sudden he had a reason for getting attention. He was always trying to get attention, but people were avoiding him. But now he was getting attention. And then after that, he became a very good doctor. How did he really get his help? Here's what he said. He found faith and hope and love and compassion and forgiveness when he became a Christian. And he worked on these emotions within the supportive, nurturing setting of his church.
Mhm.
So it provided him with the spiritual family that he simply hadn't had before.
Mm.
So we can change. And that's an amazing thing, that when we get into a supportive community, and not all communities are supportive like that, but when you find a supportive community like that, he ended up marrying very well. And he felt that his children taught him the most important lesson, and that is the lesson of unconditional love.
Mhm. So, modern science is proving that human beings are literally engineered for love and connection. And the best way to experience love is to give love, because love awakens love. Dr. Dean Ornish, in his book Love and Survival, writes, I am not aware of any other factor in medicine that has a greater impact on our survival than the healing power of love and intimacy. Not diet, not smoking, not exercise, not stress, not genetics, not drugs, not surgery.
So
But love and intimacy.
That's amazing.
Wow.
So Dr. Dean Ornish, he summarizes the unexpected messages of the rapidly accumulating body of medical data. He says this. He says, anything, listen to this one sentence, anything that promotes feelings of love and intimacy is healing. But anything that promotes, listen to all of these, isolation, separation, loneliness, loss, hostility, anger, cynicism, depression, alienation, and related feelings often leads to suffering, disease, and premature death from all causes. So, let me ask you a personal question, love. Have you ever experienced a time in your life when you had these kinds of negative feelings like loss or hostility or anger or cynicism or depression or alienation? I know you came from a good home.
Yeah. Yes, actually I have. I did many years ago when I was dating a certain guy who treated me very unlovingly. It was an extremely toxic, unloving relationship.
So what was it like?
It was horrible. I kept hoping and praying that our relationship would change and that it would improve, but it never did. And when I look back at how my health was at that time, I know that I was always sick. I was always at the doctor. But now I know that the root cause of all my illness was that I was in an unhappy relationship. And I don't blame it all on him. I blame it on myself for staying in that toxic relationship. It was very dysfunctional.
And that word dysfunctional, that's a very important word. The Latin root of that word dys means pain. So it means to function in pain. So it's kind of like walking around a pair of shoes that are too tight. If you did that for too long, you would be functioning in pain. And it only feels good once you take the shoes off.
Yes. And once I got out of that relationship, I felt like I could breathe again. My health improved and I felt free.
I can relate to that. There was a time in my life when I was also very sick. It was actually shortly after I was born. And so my parents, they were fighting all the time. And my father was drinking a lot. He became an alcoholic. And my mother was always crying. And so they ended up getting a divorce. And my mother, she took my 3 brothers and myself on a train ride all across Canada to a little town called Indian Head, Saskatchewan. And she put us in an orphanage because she couldn't take care of us. And the name of the orphanage was the Orange Home. And we were the Lemon Brothers. And so we lived there, and I lived there for the next 13 years of my life. So from the age of 3 until I was 16. And during that period of my life, I was sick a lot of the time. Sometimes I was in the hospital for very long periods of time. And there was a few times where I almost died. But still, I would go to school and I went to different events and I even played sports because it helped me to forget all of the pain. And years later, I was doing this course where I was filling out an emotional inventory to measure my EQ, my emotional quotient, and during my childhood years, and on a scale of 0 to 10. And I scored almost straight zeros across the board, which meant that according to their assessment, it was a miracle that I was still alive. And I was so empty emotionally, but not completely. Because I know, or I had a feeling somewhere deep inside of myself that my parents loved me, even though I didn't know because I didn't have a picture of it or anything like that. And so my parents had an unhappy marriage, but I survived.
So how did you survive? How did you get filled up with the love you didn't get as a child?
It actually took the love of my grandmother. She was an important person in my life. She showed me a lot of love. And she also used to read to me from the Bible and pray. And she took me to her church. And then on my part, it took a lot of work. I would read lots of books. I would pray. I learned how, to study the Bible, and I read the Bible mainly. That was one of the big books that helped me. And a lot of seeking out of wisdom and kindness and love from other people. I would notice people who had good relationships, and I would connect myself with them and get to know them, and they became like a supportive, nurturing type of family for me. So for me, I found the love that I lacked as a child mainly after I was baptized and I became an active member of my church. In fact, the church became my new family, sort of like that Godfrey Camille. So I kind of identify with his story. So the church filled me with the love that I was lacking as a child. And of course, my grandmother and other supportive people around me.
So what you're saying agrees with the Bible, which gives a definition of love in 1 John 4:16, where it says, God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God and God in them.
I like that. So God is the source of love according to the Bible. This is interesting. Let's go back to the Beatles. One of the Beatles, George Harrison, when he was asked about why they sang the song, All You Need Is Love, here's what he said. He said, we sang All You Need Is Love because it's a subtle bit of PR for God.
So George Harrison was essentially admitting that God is the source of love.
I think his statement is his recognition that love is spiritual. It is an invisible power like God. And in the Bible, again, Jesus says that God is spirit and the spirit is invisible like the wind.
So if I were to ask you to take a picture of the wind, you might take a picture of leaves rustling by the wind or someone's hair blown by the wind, but those would show me the effects of the wind, but it would not be the wind itself.
Right. So love is like that. You can't hold it in your hand or in a cup or under a microscope and say, hey, look at that. Can you see that? That's love.
But you can see the effects of love.
Yes, you can. It's very true. So in my later years, I was looking through, I got a chance to look through old family photos. And I have proof that my mom loved me because I have an old photograph. I found an old photograph of myself with my mom hugging me. So if I can, I'm going to try and put that photograph on the screen for everyone to see. Let's see if I can find it and see. Oh, now how do I give this as a shared? There you go. Okay, maybe it's that one. Can you all see that? I don't know if I can share.
Like Rene, we can't see it, but you should be able to share your screen now.
I'm trying to. There, is that it? No?
No, we don't see it.
You don't see it? Okay, what about this one? Let's see. Is that one?
No, we don't see anything.
You don't see it?
Okay.
Okay, so how do I do that?
Hit share screen.
I'll do that. Okay. Sorry, Daniel.
No worries.
Okay, I can see you. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
You can see it. Okay, so that's the picture. So discovering that picture was a big find for me because it was like, oh, haha, I have proof. But then I found another picture of myself. Let's see if I can find it. There, and that's a picture with my dad. So that was really helpful.
I also have a similar photo of me with my mother.
And so Renee's mom is still alive. So she sent us a few of those pictures. So here's her with her mom. And so we asked her, we said, could you find some photos? And of course, she found a lot. So there's a few. So you got lots of evidence.
She actually found them on those old slides and then had to turn them into a photograph, for which I'm very grateful.
Oh, that's the town that
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I'm going to stop sharing screen. Can I do that? Okay, let's do that. Okay, good. So, although love is invisible, love is beautiful. And those pictures are not a photograph of love. That is a picture of me being loved by my mother and a picture of Rene being loved by her mother. So you can't take a picture of the thing love, but you can show the effects of love. So it's beautiful. It's like the fragrance of a flower. You can't see it, but it makes life so much sweeter.
Mm-hmm. Yes, 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 to 8 gives us a clearer picture of love. Look at what those verses tell us about love. And we're going to finish with this. Those verses say, love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails.
So thank you very much. It was nice being able to share this with you. And if any of you have any questions, and thank you so much, Daniel, for organizing this. It was our opportunity to be able to sit down and put some notes together on this. This is kind of the tip of the iceberg. There was so much more that we discovered. But if you have some questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah, Mike, Rene, thank you so much. That was wonderful. Really love the last passage that you read there, Rene. And we do have some questions. Before we do that, I just want to say hi to those who are watching on Facebook. Sometimes we forget our Facebook audience, but there are people watching on Facebook. So I just want to thank you. And we are monitoring the chat. So if you have a question, just feel free to throw it in there, and we'll try to get to those as well. So Mike and Rene, we don't have that much time, but we do have some questions coming in. So let's kind of get to them. First one from Allison. Thank you, Allison, for joining us. Very timely question, actually. Allison says, without love, I wonder how many seniors have died in the nursing homes due to being isolated in this COVID pandemic, unable to see and touch their loved ones. So what are your thoughts on that? I think people
I think there's
this.
Yeah, I think there's a terrible fallout from all of this. And the feelings that are being generated within people of fear and isolation. I mean, you can't really, this is a hard thing to measure how much love people are getting. But I was just talking to someone today who said she has not seen her father in 4 months, and her father is in a nursing home. And she says she saw him on a Zoom chat, and he's looking very frail and very thin, and she knows that she would have taken much better care of him, and he's lost a lot of weight, and she's very afraid for his life. So yeah, I think that's a very good question, Allison.
And very sad.
Very sad.
Yeah.
It's a tough one.
It is
too, yeah. But yeah, that's a good point. We have another question here. I've heard that love improves the immune system. So yeah, I'm not sure if your comments are that, or anyone else.
There's a lot that you can say on that topic, but one of the books that I found very helpful, and I think most people probably have access to it. It was written a number of years ago. It's called Outliers, and the very first part of that book, I don't know if it's the first chapter or the foreword of the book, and it's talking about a little town called what's the name of the place? It's Rosetta in the United States, and this little Italian town, and they were not dying of heart disease like the rest of the United States. And they thought, these people, wow, they must eat well, they must have good genetics, all of that. They found that they were eating poorly, even more poorly than the people in the surrounding towns, and yet there was no heart disease. So it wasn't their food, it wasn't their diet. They thought maybe it's something in the water. They checked that, the water was the same as people around them. They checked their genetics with the other people from the same town of Rosetta in Italy, where they came from. And those people in Italy were dying of heart disease, but they were not. So what was it? They found that there was the protectiveness of this close community, that they shared everything, that no one was poorer or richer than the rest, that they were so close and they had an integrated community. And they said that their findings were that it was the protectiveness of this loving community that gave them such robust health. And that was amazing. So yes, I think it's definite. There's a lot of evidence that shows that it protects your immunity. Yeah.
So there was
or gives you a stronger immunity. Yeah.
But it was their community, and also they had a sense of belonging.
Yes.
And a sense of purpose, because they were helping each other.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's a book by Malcolm Gladwell, right? Outliers.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, we did do a previous session where we talked about the blue zones and how their strong social relationships also seem to help promote their longevity and health. It's kind of similar to what you just mentioned here. So yeah, thank you for that. We have a question. Two individuals asking the same question. It's how do you love someone who seems unlovable? So you touched on how love is a choice, but sometimes it can be hard. So any thoughts on that? It could be a friend, maybe even a spouse. You kind of fallen out of love.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you do there?
Someone who's unlovable. Well, that's a very interesting question. Do you want to talk about that? Have you got? It really is a choice at the end of the day. When you're looking at someone, I mean, we were both in teaching for many, many years. Okay. So we were teaching in British Columbia for 12 years, lots of students. But in British Columbia, in South Africa, we taught for quite a number of years as well. So what we found is sometimes you get students who come across as very annoying and unlovable, and they're pushing, and they have a hard time accepting love. To understand, I've always taken the outlook, because I mean, I came from a disturbed, background myself, as I shared, that there are things, underlying issues in that person's life that I don't always blame them for, and mostly you shouldn't. And so to try and look for the best in others, and when you do, you bring out the best from them. And so to try and not look at their behaviors, but rather their potential. And that's always been helpful for me. And sometimes it takes long, but if you persistently fill their cup, you can see some amazing results. Yeah.
But it does take time, though.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Love is hard work.
Just want to thank you for that. I just want to pause and say hi to Jeannie. She's watching on Facebook from Mexico. It's amazing. So hi Jeannie, thanks for joining us. Yeah, so if you have any other questions, please feel free to add them in here. I just have a personal question myself. Sometimes, and this may be coming from more of a younger person, sometimes when you watch the media and what people talk about love, it sounds like, when you're dating, you're in love, but then it kind of seems like, it makes it sound like after marriage, kind of love dies. It's kind of like love is exciting, and then it becomes like a drag afterwards. So can love continue to grow, and how can that happen?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of the things that has helped me to understand that is you can look at the other person as being a life preserver, and you're lost at sea. If you do, you tend to squeeze the life out of them. And then there's nothing left. And that is not going to be fulfilling for that other person or for you in the end. So my approach to it has been to learn how to get to know the other person, which takes time. And time is really what I've seen from all my study on happy marriages, that those who take time before they get into any kind of physical intimacy tend to have happier, longer, and more loving relationships. So it doesn't get less, it gets more. So I can testify from our marriage that it has gotten better. It was amazing when we first met, But when we had kids, you know, there's people who say, oh, it goes down. It didn't. I think our love in our family just got greater and greater. Those are the happiest years, really, with the kids. And now it's incredible happy. I mean, they have grown and they're independent and, you know, going off to university and doing their things. So yeah, no, I don't think that it declines if you get to know the person and you love the person for who they are and not for what they can give you. So you're giving instead of expecting to get. And really, at the end of the day, your brain is saying, is this a win or a loss? And so when you know that when you give to the other person, that's always a win. Some people see it that, oh, I've given something away, that's a loss. No, it's not a loss. The more you give, the more you win, because that other person wins. And when you're blessing others, that's the greatest thing you can do for the relationship. And in the end, you benefit, you win.
So that's then what makes love a principle and not a feeling.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. But the feelings overflow and they're wonderful.
When you stick to that principle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So intimacy grows. And if you read Dean Ornish's book, he says that the intimacy he has with his wife has gotten more, it has improved and improved and improved. It's just gotten greater. So he always thought he should have a lot of different, you know, relationships with women and then go to the next one when this one would die out and that kind of thing. He says that you never come to love that way. And he really has experienced the intimacy that comes from real love. So that word intimacy, let me just say this. It's into me see. And the only person who can allow you to see into me is me. And when I'm vulnerable and when I let you see into me, then there's that connection. And then
that emotional connection.
And it's reciprocal. Love begets love.
That's radically different from what we hear about love in the popular culture.
It's radically different. The problem is that in the popular culture, boy sees girl, and the next scene they're in bed. Bad, bad, bad. That is the wrong formula for a happy marriage. Okay, and all the studies show that the longest, happiest relationships are those who knew each other for at least 2 years before physical intimacy, and that is showing over and over again. So people rush to get to know the person, and then all of a sudden they've been intimate with someone that's like, what else do I give?
Well, when you're friends and you get to really know each other, and there's no intimacy, then there's no pressure.
Yes.
Right? You can be yourself because you're just friends. There's not a pressure of, you know, of it becoming more or getting more serious or that commitment, because you're just enjoying each other's company and really getting to know each other.
Absolutely.
So.
Okay, I love this intimacy, into me see.
Yeah.
I'll put it in the chat box. All right, so we are at 5 o'clock, so we're gonna wrap it up here. Again, Mike and Rene, thank you so much for taking time to share with us today. We really appreciate it. I want to thank everyone who's joined us on the Zoom and also on Facebook as well. Thank you so much for joining us for this Love is Medicine event. Go to lifestylemed.org and /Love is Medicine. You'll see our upcoming events as well. Also /online to see our other health events that we put on. So again, thank you so much for joining us. This session has been recorded. You could go to our Facebook page, Lifestyles Medicine, and you can see it again if you wish. So yeah, thank you, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
See you. Thank you.